and welcome everyone. I'm going to briefly remind you once again of the format of our Odyssey. Um, and for those of you, and several of you are regular attendees, this will get boring, but here we go. We're going to allow Richard to speak uninterrupted for 30, 40 minutes, whatever he would like to do. After about 40 minutes, I usually cut you off if that's an issue. A lot of people don't go that long, but when he's done, we will take a moment of silence, and it's actually 60 seconds, 1 minute. After that brief time to just think about his words, we'll pass a collection and have questions. I will pass the microphone to the questioners because these sessions are recorded and we'd like to get both the question and the answer. As always, Richard has the option of answering or not answering any of the questions. So, without further ado, Richard Thompson.
Well, hello. As Beth mentioned, I am Richard Thompson, better known as that guy who wears the bow ties. Um, I'm going to start this religious odyssey the way I start most religious discussions by saying that I am the product of an atheist and an agnostic, so I'm not really sure what I don't believe in. Um, anyway, joking aside, that's actually a pretty accurate statement. My dad is definitely an atheist, and my mother is um, basically agnostic. And as such, I had no religion forced on me as a child, and or adolescent for that matter. And generally speaking, I think it's a good thing. However, there are a few drawbacks to that I'll be discussing. I should clarify though that my parents did not raise me without values. They did really raise me with values. They just weren't religious. You know, there was morals without mythology, some people might say. Um, the values they tried to instill were honesty and compassion. Um, as also progressive values like helping out people that have less opportunities than you've had, peaceful resolution of conflict, fairness, not just to people of other sexualities, but also to people who have different religions or races and that kind of thing. So values were there, and we'll come to that later. And this does not mean being raised with no religion that I didn't think about religion and spirituality a lot or just deep thoughts a lot. I actually did. My mother loves to tell the story that when I was like 7 or 8, I'm sitting there eating lunch and I don't know what she was doing. She was in the kitchen. And I said, Mom, I think I figured out what the meaning of life is. And mind you, this is like the first or second grader talking. Um, And she said, "What is it?" Expecting it to have something to do with like Ghostbusters or Ninja Turtles. Um, and I said, "Well, I think it's a test to find out what kind of a person you are."
Oh.
And she was like, "What? You're thinking you're supposed to be like playing soccer or something, and you're thinking about this stuff?" I go back to eating your SpaghettiOs. Um, so anyway, um, one of the things that will be sort of a theme to the stuff we talk about with my childhood is that I grew up in a big Catholic neighborhood, even though I was obviously not Catholic. Um, for those of you that are familiar, there's a big orange church in Overland Park called Holy Spirit, that not only is a church but also I think is an elementary school. And our backyard literally backed out into their parking lot. So it was Catholic, a lot of kids, which made pickup games of basketball fairly easy. Um, but didn't exactly fit in there perfectly, although none of the boys were mean to me for that reason. Um, anyway, we come to the drawbacks. Lacking religious education um, is kind of a problem. I mean, I'm never in favor of someone having religion forced upon them or even encouraging one religion over the other, but I do kind of wish in our schools we had a little bit more of a comparative religion kind of a thing early on, if for no other reason that we need to understand other people's customs and culture. we do a lot of business with Japan. If we don't understand Buddhism, at least the basic parts, we're liable to make a faux pas that will kill a business deal. So that's just me on my soapbox. But to illustrate how the lack of religious education was a problem, and my mother again loves this story. When I was very little, even younger than the life is a test story, uh, well, I'll back up here. Our Catholic neighborhood put out a lot of Christmas stuff, and the gaudiest display was the one next door with the Glats. I mean, I'm talking big gaudy lights all over the house, light up plastic everything under the sun. And they even had a full manger scene with light up plastic Joseph and Mary and baby Jesus and everything. It was a complete set. And one time, and I find this hilarious in retrospect, someone actually stole the baby Jesus out of the manger. And I don't know why they did that, if they were just some drunk teenager or I don't know. I mean, it's funny though. Anyway, so I'm like really little, maybe 5, and I come running into my mother and say, "Mom, the baby Jesus has been stolen." She looks at me and is like, "The baby Jesus?" I said, "Yeah, the baby Jesus, over in the manger." Baby, you mean the baby Jesus? Yeah, honey, those two words don't mean the same thing. So anyway, not having any religious education was a bit of a problem there. Um, the other drawback um, is that, there was a spiritual component in my life that was missing. And I don't mean to say that everyone needs to have a spiritual component to their life. My father is an atheist. I don't think he has a ton of that. And if that works for you, I'm happy for you, but I needed it and it wasn't there.
Hmm.
So I'm this little heathen boy living in this Catholic neighborhood, and one of the questions I remember getting so much was, because they all went to their church school, it was, do they believe in God at your school? And I would say, well, it's a public school, so you can believe whatever you want. A lot of people believe in God, some people don't. And you know, you some of them believe in God, but it's not your God. Um, and they would look at me with this perplexed look, like, how is that possible? I mean, they were little kids at the time, and so was I. But I mean, it's interesting. They couldn't imagine a school without regular prayer, Bible study, all that kind of stuff. And obviously, therefore, my Bible study is a lot different than what I envisioned. Like this is how it is. Um, But now we come to the advantages of not having religion forced on you as a child. And one of the biggest is I wanted that spiritual development. I sought it out as an adult. I don't know if you all have had experiences, but I've had so many friends that, did seek out, or not to seek out, had religion forced on them as a child and adolescent, and just completely abandoned it as an adult. I mean, I had one of my best friends, um, growing up had Catholicism forced on him, and it was, hardcore forced on him. And when we were in late high school, he was like, "I'm never going to a Catholic church again." I don't know if he's stuck to that, but he really wanted to get away from it, basically. I mean, I don't know if he said I'm never going to do it again, but he definitely said, I do not want to go anymore. I don't believe some of this stuff, and I don't like the way people act. So anyway, but I sought it out. And it was mostly in late adolescence and college when I started finding the need to seek it out. I dated a girl named Caitlin. I dated a girl named Caitlin. I dated a girl named Caitlin, and she was Baha'i. Um, and she had a belief in Baha'i that I found very, very attractive. Um, just about the religion itself. And that is, for those of you that are not familiar with Baha'i, they believe that all these supposed saviors, messiahs, prophets, etc., were all incarnations of God. No one world religion is better than the other. They all have something to teach us that's important. They all have truth. And they also believe that Buddha, Jesus, Muhammad, Abraham, etc., were incarnations of God, not just one. And I found that very attractive because I've always thought that it's very stupid how some Christians in this country, in fact, probably even a lot of them, um, think that if you don't believe the same thing they believe, at least in terms of being a Christian, you're going to hell. I think that's inaccurate, and I frankly find it to be a little bit of a form of bigotry. I don't think a million people, or a billion people, excuse me, in India and China are going to hell just because they're Hindus and Buddhists, respectively. Um, to me, that's not fair. Um, so I thought that was cool. And I started exploring that. But at the same time, when Caitlin and I broke up, I really started questioning my sexuality a lot more. Um, and my same-sex attractions had been there since puberty started, but there were so many myths out there at the time, and probably still today, that I thought, it was okay um, or I mean, it was going to go away. People tell you, oh, it's just a phase, and you grow out of it, and all kinds of stuff. I, I have a story about that, but it's not church appropriate. So it's not anything I did. It's just something my friend, yeah, it's not anything I did. My friend announced something completely inaccurate about homosexuality to people on the bus, and it just kind of illustrates what a myth it is. But I won't get into it. Um, anyway, so um, the problem with Baha'i was that despite being a generally progressive religion, at the time at least, and mind you, this is about 20 years ago, um, it was very sexually conservative. No sex outside of marriage, and it was a sin because gay people could get married and they didn't think they should, for gay people to have sex. Um, at the time, they had what was a moderately progressive thing. My understanding from her was that they would accept a celibate homosexual, which at that time was moderately progressive. I mean, it wasn't as good as the Unitarians, of course, but it was a lot better than the right wing churches that were preaching fire and brimstone. And I should clarify that the girl I had dated was not a homophobe. She had many gay friends. She was generally supportive of gay rights, and I, when I asked her what she would do if there was a homosexual Baha'i that was practicing, she said, "Well, I'd accept them. It's fine. I mean, I do think it's a sin, but I am not perfect either." Which at the time was a lot better than, um, at least that was my understanding from what she said. And at the time, that was a lot better than most people. Um, anyway, so the LGBTQ thing, as I'm seeking out spirituality, becomes more and more of an issue because this is like moving into 2004, 2005, and because of the prominence of same-sex marriage, so many ministers are preaching that gay people are going to hell, that same-sex marriage is an abomination. And I'm starting to feel like most people think I'm going to hell because even in progressive states, marriage amendments are passing um, at a wide, wide margin. And it's, I start wondering if I'm going to hell. A lot of other people think that. I mean, I should clarify that my parents never said that. When I came out to them, they were nothing but supportive. Um, Obviously, they wouldn't tell me I'm going to hell since probably neither of them believe in it. Um, but my mom and I had gay friends for a long time. My dad had a bisexual friend that some of you might know named Chuck Dedmond, who went to law school with him and was still a friend to that day, to this day, actually. You might know his partner Michael Nelson a little bit better. He's a Unitarian minister. Um, anyway, so there were no problems with my folks. Most of my friends were supportive. It was just something that because so many religious leaders were talking about it in this way, I thought, maybe they're right. And so many people in older generations that weren't Unitarians thought that too. So maybe they're right. And then I picked up a book that kind of changed my life in some ways. And it's why it's so memorable to me. It's called Jesus Rode a Donkey. Um, it's written by a woman, and I'm going to forget how you pronounce her last name. It's Linda Seeger or Sager. And she's a theology scholar. And in the book, at a time when right-wing ministers were um, talking about social issues and using biblical quotes to justify their positions on it, uh, she wrote a book where she, not only on social issues, but every issue under the sun, used biblical quotes to justify liberal positions and to question some of the quotes the other people were espousing. Um, some of you may have seen Linda. Um, I'm going to forget how long ago it was, but I think it was maybe 2 or 3 years ago. Linda came and I had her speak at the forum. At the time, we were doing Zoom, so it was really easy because we didn't have to fly her in from wherever she was. But she was there. Um, anyway, so in the book, she argues uh, two things, and both of them I think are probably accurate, but the second one is the one I'm more taken with. First, she argues, for those of you that are unfamiliar, in the New Testament, most of the quotes about homosexuality are from Paul. There are zero quotes from Jesus. Interesting. Um, but she looks at the actual Greek and Latin words that Paul used and examines them and reveals that a lot of them don't equate to any monogamous gay couple like we would think of them today. Um, they equate more to people using each other. So maybe a younger gay man shouldn't use an older gay man for his money, or maybe it's about male prostitution or casual sex or something like that. Um, they don't equate to the act of making love between two men that are committed and love each other, or two women. Um, but the second one is the one I'm more taken with, and that is she argues in the book that the laws about homosexuality were probably cultural laws. Um, some of the Old Testament quotes she admits were probably correctly translated. But when the Bible was written, both the Old and New Testament, but especially the Old Testament, the world was very, very sparsely populated with people, and healthcare was absolutely terrible. You might have 10 kids and have two or three of them survive to when they could reproduce. So, because of this, it was necessary for people to reproduce and reproduce a lot. Otherwise, the human race was going to die out. Now, I would argue that we are past the point in society where sex has to be about procreation. We are overpopulated in a lot of places, and I'm not just talking about New York and Chicago and LA. I mean, if you've seen, I've seen videos and pictures of India and China, these people mashed in together, and most of it's due to overpopulation. And so I think that people that choose not to procreate are not committing a sin, um, whether they're heterosexual or homosexual or what. Um, but I also find it interesting that right wingers find it a sin because two men or two women can't have a baby together, but the heterosexual couples that um, choose not to procreate, they don't find that to be sinful, or that can't procreate due to health reasons. Um, so anyway, this is sort of a side note, but also in the book, she notes that there are less than 10 passages in the Bible that anyone would refer to, anyone would argue refer to homosexuality. There are more, there are several hundred that refer to helping the poor, the sick, and the needy.
Mhm.
So these right-wing ministers are really emphasizing the wrong thing. And many of those hundreds that I'm talking about helping the poor, the sick, and the needy, come from Jesus himself. And again, he didn't say anything about LGBTQ people, at least nothing that's printed in the Bible. And I think that if they thought it was important and he had said it, they would have put it in there. Anyway, so I'm convinced I'm not going to hell. Um, finally. And I start seeking out a church to sort of fill this spiritual void that's been there for a long time. And because of Michael Nelson was a Unitarian minister and sort of for a while became one of my mentors, um, and because my parents knew him, I got a lot of encouragement to try out a Unitarian church. And I found that um, most of the people directed me here.
Mhm.
So I came here, um, uh, mostly because I thought I'd be pro LGBTQ. And when I walked in the door, I noticed we had a rainbow flag at a time when so many people were never going to even consider doing something like that. So I thought that was cool. But what I found cooler was that they connected to the progressive values that my parents had tried to reinforce. Not just fairness towards LGBTQ, although that was definitely preached in my household. I guess that was when I got the preaching, was when we talked about politics. Uh, um, but fairness towards people of other races, religions. We believe in peaceful resolution of conflict, helping those that have less opportunities than us. So anyway, that was also very attractive to me. I also got along with a lot of the people in the congregation, so that was wonderful. Um, and I took a new member class and enjoyed that, and joined. And then I wasn't very consistent about coming here for a while. Part of the time I was in Colombia, and then part of the time was just, um, I don't know why I didn't come. I just didn't. But a few years ago, I started picking it up again, and I've come a little more regularly since then. Um, I did come to a few conclusions about religion, and my conclusions about stuff like religion are usually tentative or can always change. And I'll discuss those briefly before we open up for questions. The first conclusion I've come to is that there's some sort of great spirit out there. I don't know if it's the one supreme being that the Western religions tend to preach, if there's many gods like Hinduism, or if there's, just an ultimate reality like they preach in Buddhism. But I think there's something out there. Another is that there's a reason why we have to overcome adversity in life. And life is a test. I was 7-ish, and now I'm 37, and I still believe it. Um, um, anyway, and again, drawing from that girl that taught me so much about pi, I tend to believe that all the religions have something important to teach us that we can learn from, and they all have truth to them. And I don't believe, and this is the only distinction I make on deity and messiahs with um, pies. I don't believe that Jesus, Muhammad, Abraham, Buddha, etc., were um, incarnations of God, but I do believe they may have been prophets or enlightened fully by God. Um, anyway, as far as heaven and hell goes, I've come to the conclusion that there is probably a heaven, but there's definitely no hell. I just don't believe that any great spirit would send people to a lake of fire to burn for all eternity, even if they're bad people that are like, act murderers or something, and I've never um, atoned. And the question I usually get from religious conservatives is, well, then does everyone get into heaven? And if not, where do the souls go that don't go to heaven? And my response, that the conclusion that I've come to on that is over time, no, they probably don't go to heaven, but I do believe in maybe they get reincarnated or something. Sort of if you don't get it right the first time, try it again. Um, anyway, so that's just a little bit about what I believe and how I got there. Um, and with that, I will open things up for a moment of silence and questions, etc.
Thank you so much, Richard. So as we pass the offering basket, if you'll raise your hand, I will bring you the microphone. And of course, always remember, he may choose to answer your question. He may choose to change the subject or give you a very obscure answer that you didn't understand, but that's okay.
Sorry if I use the restroom while they're doing collection.
Sure. Wait till he comes back is my recommendation. He just took a quick break. He'll be back. You gonna entertain us? No. What would you like me to do, David? Beware. Let me just do it. He asked you to do it. Never mind. No, he. Well, those I will make a quick, actually, just so everybody can hear, I will make a quick pitch for presenting your Odyssey. If you've not done so and think you might like to, please talk to me. This summer is all filled, but next summer is wide open.
Well, thank you very much for that trip through your your religious quest. You made just in passing reference to being in Colombia. Was that Colombia, South America? What were you doing there, and how um, did your quest for finding meaning in life or religion fit in with whatever you have done professionally?
As was the Columbia thing just a joke, or did you seriously want to know what? Um, I I was in Mizzou. Um, Ironically, my dad's whole side of the family went to KU, but anyway, so the can you still hear me through the mic? Okay. Um, so you asked about my professional career. Well, I am in nonprofits. Some of you know this and some of you don't, and I do nonprofit fundraising. And one of the things I love about my career is I'm helping people. That value I talked about of helping people that have had less opportunities than I've had um, is very important. I work for a group called Save Inc., and we do housing for homeless populations, and it's been really rewarding to provide housing for people that are homeless. Um, Previous jobs, I've been helping different people, prison populations, you know, uh, people that can't afford a good education, and even childhood cancer patients. So that's sort of something that's been very rewarding and part of my values and spiritual development has been discovered there.
Hey, Richard. When you talked about being seven and having that moment of epiphany, perhaps they say that young souls have remembrances. And if you feel maybe there's types of reincarnation when you felt life was a test, do you have connections perhaps to what your spirituality is that you might want to share? Like some people have shared music and art and other things. Do you ever have moments when you feel connected to what you say might be your connection to the great spirit that you've said and that type of connection of moments of epiphany?
Um, uh, as far as uh, what's a good one? Um, as far as creative stuff goes, most of my creativity was in writing short stories and stuff. Not a ton of them were particularly spiritual or religious. Um, uh, I, as I mentioned, I get, some spiritual fulfillment through my work, um, a lot. So that's one place. But as far as recent epiphanies go, I haven't had a ton of those. I do find a connection, in, you know, uh, writing or public speaking or something. One of the things you all know I love is public speaking, and sometimes that can be a connection. Um, Other times being demonstrative with people, like family and people that I'm close to, are kind of a form of spiritual connection to me. Like I write my family letters on their birthdays, holidays, etc. Um, and some of you saw the speech I gave about Sean last week, and that was kind of a spiritual connection for me.
So, from my experience with you, you've always done your homework on every issue, and your forum was incredibly well done. And those of you
Thank
who
you.
have not heard that should take a moment to listen to it. I too share some of this experience of having no religious background and from the church with family. And do you find that there's another aspect of when going to funerals or going to services or whatever, that you don't know the songs or the chants that are coming your way at these events?
Um, yes. So I used to work for Cristo Rey High School. Um, for those of you that aren't familiar, it was actually, ironically enough, a Catholic college prep school. This Catholicism thing seems to follow me. Um, College prep school that caters exclusively to low income kids. And what I was attracted to there was it was giving a good education to people that couldn't afford it, um, rather than the Catholic component. But we had monthly mass, and everyone, including staff, was required to go to that. So I would go to these mass services not knowing what the heck I was doing, and people were doing, the whole hand signals and everything and doing communion, and I was just like looking at the person next to me, trying not to stand out too much. So that's kind of an example that was like that.
A statement before I ask the question. Apparently, UU churches are one of the only growing congregations in the United States. And this is in against a huge number, a double-digit number of people who are unchurched. And the unchurched population, the people who don't go to church, don't attend church, don't belong to a church, don't affiliate with church, that unchurched population is your generation. I wonder if you have any thoughts on why all those under 45-year-old people are unchurched.
Well, my thought would be that they were like the friend I was talking about and had religion forced on them, and then as they got the freedom to get away from it as an adult, they did. There is uh, when you try to force someone to believe something, maybe at a young age it works, but when you continue doing it and you kind of ram it down their throats, it's not something that generally has a positive impact on them towards that religion. So that would be my suggestion, based on what I've seen from friends and acquaintances. But I don't know entirely why. And you're right. Most of the mainstream churches, I guess they don't consider us mainstream, but most of the mainstream churches are shrinking, and that whole unchurched population is growing quite fast.
As quick follow-up to her question, what do you think is the relevance of being a member of this church for you?
I'm not sure if I understand the question.
What I know you said that you had this void, a spiritual void that you were seeking to fill. I- Either either way, you could describe the void, or what I was actually interested in is in what way has All Souls filled that void?
Um, yeah, so well, through discussions with people and a class I took with Kendall, I've had sort of opportunities to kind of explore um, different religions, although a lot of it was done outside of this church. Um, uh, and those, conclusions I was talking about, just through time and talking to people, reading about things, came to different conclusions. So the other thing is, stuff I do at the church sometimes leads to a spiritual connection, kind of like what you were talking about, like, uh, even just tabling at Pride and letting people know there is a religion out there that will love you, accept you, marry you. So,
Would you I have two questions real quick. Is it I would ask that you explain more about your new job, which I think is interesting, and tell us about that. Um, I've been reading Robert Ingersoll lately, and note that he describes some of the inconsistencies and the craziness of religion and things that are not believable, and a level of insanity associated with those who believe in so much fiction. And do you find that to be a relevant part of the experience of, in fact, to her question as well? I think that is a driving force for some of these folks who are not being involved in religion. Or comment on that.
yeah, so as it pertains to the first question, Save Inc. does housing for LGBTQ plus youth, people with HIV and AIDS, and people with mental health and substance abuse issues. I have a history of mental health issues in my family, and obviously grew up LGBTQ, so I have a very personal connection to it. I think it's an amazing thing, and Pride Haven is where the LGBTQ youth stay. And because so many parents, they come out to mom and dad, then mom and dad say bye. Um, so that working for that cause has been very spiritually rewarding for me. I've even sort of made friends with one of the residents, um, and I have uh, a couple I know has brought their son in, and we were able to get him housing as well. So it was all very rewarding things for me. What was the second question again?
It was about the idea of the level of insanity associated with believing unbelievable religious thought.
Level of
Or
insanity. Um,
fiction you're after believing.
well, I don't know as far as insanity goes, but some people, uh, they when they get up there at the pulpit and they say, the homosexuals are burning in hell and our society is going to burn in hell as a result of, the things they've done. If someone, like my friend has a gay friend, they're gonna go, well, that's terrible. So that's one way in which And then, a lot of these religions are also driving out, other forms of progressives, pro-choice women, or just women in general, and stuff like that. So, yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I do know that sometimes people go the other way, but I feel like our unchurched and Unitarians are growing faster. That answer your question?
This relates to your current job. My neighbor and I have for years delivered Meals on Wheels, and we frequently come upon people living alone who can't hear, have a hard time getting to the door, and obviously, and are very desperately lonely. And that brings up, why couldn't some of these people be paired up with some of the homeless? And because it seems ridiculous.
No one buy me again.
What did you say? What do you mean the roommate situation? Well, these people that we encounter when we deliver meals, they can't hear and they have a hard time getting to the door and answering the phone or anything. And they obviously should not be living alone, but
Yeah.
they do. Yes.
Um, so you're asking as it pertains to my job?
She
Yeah. So, ideally, they'd be able to be in assisted living of some kind. With Save Inc., we do case management for some people. And that could be kind of cool especially if they have like a mental health or substance abuse issue. Um, but as far as assistance with like daily activities and stuff, we usually try to connect them to the STAIR program, which is something that connects them to University Health, and they help them with that. That's as far as our managed properties go. We also do vouchers for people and with the vouchers, they can live anywhere in a 15 county area, provided that the landlord accepts them. Um, am I not? Well,
I think what she was trying to ask is, would there be benefit to both a person experiencing houselessness and an elderly person who needs a companion in the home, pairing them up so that the houseless person could live with the elderly person,
They're not always elderly.
or non-elderly, just perhaps frail in some other way?
that sounds,
Basically, like how the days do it.
yeah. So that sounds like a creative solution to two big problems, and I think that's a wonderful idea. Um, I don't think at Save we've done that to my knowledge, but
Right here.
There's someone else before you.
But this is to Claudine. What was the organization you were tied to when you were home sharing?
Home sharing was the organization,
And it was a struggle.
and it worked.
Okay.
that's the organization. That's the organization that put the
Talking at
homeless
the same
people in with the elderly people. Or
It was an organization put together. It started, I don't know who the original person was, but it was through Metropolitan Junior College, and it was called home sharing. And I shared my home a lot, and that's what she's getting at.
okay.
Did it work well for you?
It worked for me. I didn't understand.
Yeah, our program it doesn't do those things. Yeah, the way we do it at Save Inc., we don't do those things, but I mean, that's a very wonderful creative solution to a problem, and I think it's a good idea. I could certainly mention it to someone at our organization. They might find it to be a little bit mission creep since creep. Do you know what that means? Means you're getting outside of your actual mission, but maybe they wouldn't. Obviously, homelessness is the main thing we're trying to work on, so that does address homelessness.
I was chair of the board of home sharing for several years, and it was taken over by Link. And I don't know whether Link is still operating it or not. It's been, probably about 6 years since I've been involved, but the people who were applying to live with someone else, and it might be a graduate student or it might be an adult who was looking for a different living situation, were, um, you know, the, there was a review process, so it wasn't just grabbing anyone. There was a careful placement, and it was very helpful for a number of people. But that might be worth looking into.
Um,
Okay, so I mean, I think we're getting a little afield from your religious odyssey. I'm just going to try to draw us a little bit back on track. Claudine, I'll come over in just a sec. But I wanted to say that um, whoever it was that mentioned at age 7 your epiphany of we're here to, this is a trial to see what kind of person we are. You may or may not remember, but do you remember what caused you to think that? Was there an event or just you had that idea, it just popped fully formed in your head, or do you remember how that came to you as something that made sense?
that was so long ago that I don't really remember what the thought process was. I mostly just remember my mom telling the story over and over again of how funny she thought it was that here was this little kid whose peers were all, watching Ghostbusters on the TV, who was sitting there thinking about the meaning of life. I mean, it's not something a ton of 7-year-olds spend a lot of time thinking about. She just uh, and they, my dad and I share this humor as well. Thought it was a funny thing to be interested in at 7. Um, but yeah.
Uh, Richard, when I first started here, something about a long time ago, at one time or another, we would have different talk that we put on about different religions. And we were all, as I can remember, all of us were still searching. Not that we had, but we were still searching, and this church was helping us. And so, did you find that this church helped you in your search?
It did a little bit, because one of the things was, as I got in here, not just the rainbow flag on the outside, but I started talking to the people and coming out to the people. And the more I came out, and the more people were like, "Well, hey, it's cool with us." And not only that, but I think you should be able to get married, and I don't think it's a sin at all what you do in your bedroom with a consenting adult. Um, so because of that, I realized, hey, some of these, it's okay. I'm not going, I'm definitely not going to hell. Um, so in that sense, it helped my spiritual development. Is that your?
Sort of. One of the things that we had along the way was a very active interweave group. And we had people that were in your situation that felt wanted, that felt that our church was helping make those decisions?
Um, yeah, so I don't remember a ton about doing interweave at the time, although I do remember the group existing. I do know that Alex Westerfelt is talking about doing that now, and I think that's a wonderful idea. And I have told him I'd love to be involved in any way, including organizing the group, provided that I have somebody else to help me with that one. But yeah, I mean, that would definitely be a spiritual connection that is significant to me. It, but I really do think, just realizing it's okay, and maybe it's even, a positive thing for you. If someone were to say, I do think homosexuality and bisexuality and everything else is biological, but if someone were to convince me that, my parents had in some way made me gay, I would tell my parents, thank you. Now, I mean, if that were the case, I am loud and proud now, and if someone could give me a pill that would change who I am, I would turn it down. So it's not even laziness. I really don't want to change.
Okay, well, I'm just gonna give two very brief and I think fun anecdotes about raising children in UUs. Um, one profound, one funny. My daughter once announced on the way home from church school that she wanted to become Jewish because they had been studying comparative religions. And so I asked, "Oh, really? Why is that? Tell me more." And she said, "Because at Hanukkah they get gifts for 8 days." So you never know what the lesson is.
Yeah.
But my son one time, and this was amazing to me, on the way home from church, said or asked, why do people die? And, I'm thinking, is he talking biology? Does he want a medical explanation? Is this a spiritual, quest or whatever? Anyway, I did Parenting 101 and said, well, why do you think they die? Which turned out to be exactly the right question because he said, well, if you live forever and you're going to see endless sunsets, you don't need to enjoy the one today.
That is profound.
And he was about 7.
Yeah,
So
these 7-year-olds, I mean,
I'm telling you,
think
I'm telling
philosophy.
you, I have never forgotten it because it moved me deeply and it made me again realize, that big and profound gift that living life really is. And if anything can do that, it's a good thing. And church does that for me. So if no other questions, nobody had their hands up, we'll just thank Richard very, very much.
Thank you.